Hello, everybody, and welcome to a JMO online event. My name is Pauline Woods-Wilson. I'm president of the Morris Federation, but we're hosting this as a JMO event for all the three orgs. That includes the Morris Ring and the Open Morris. Today's all about recruitment, which is obviously a hot topic for all Morris organisations, which is why we're doing it together. And first up, we're going to have John Brenner of Five Rivers Morris in Sheffield. And then our second speaker of today is going to be Eddie Worrall of Saddleworth Women's Morris and Clog. So if we're all ready, I'm going to hand over to you, John.
Hello, everyone. As Pauline said, I'm John Brenner. I'm from Five Rivers Morris, and we're a Cotswold team in Sheffield. I'm going to blurt a bit today, and I'm not an expert in recruitment. What I have been around is several Morris teams that have been good at recruitment. So I'm going to blurt some thoughts about recruitment in general and a bit of a case study about Five Rivers and what we do and what we find is useful and what we find are barriers for us to recruitment. And my aim is not to give you just a model that you can just take up, because I don't think there is a model that's right for every team, but to give you some ideas that might be right for you, your teams, the teams around you, or just for general interest. So I hope that's all right. I'm going to just blurt away for a few minutes, and I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards. I've got some slides I'm going to share shortly, and these will be available via and Pauline will talk about the arrangements for them being available afterwards, but we will make that they are available. Firstly, who am I? Who are we? Well, we are Five Rivers Morris, a Cotswold team going about 16 years in Sheffield. Over the time, we've had about 45 members, 30 of whom are still active to some degree or another. Me personally, I was one of the founder members of Five Rivers and probably the original administrative force, although burden has thankfully been shared in many directions over that time. I'm also been the dance director at Shrewsbury Festival for the dance tent rather than the Morris. I'm very involved in the Children's Festival at Sidmouth. Been on the board of EFTUS. Was one of the original people involved with Shooting Roots. Morris World. I've been in Hammersmith Morris, including their bagman, Morris Offspring, for those long enough in the tooth to remember Morris Offspring. More recently, Twin Sword, as in very much in the background of the kids team, and play with a band called the Glowworms. I suppose the other thing to note about me that may be relevant here is I'm not necessarily that great with tech. So I won't be giving you lots of social media, press this button and everybody will arrive at your Morris practice tips, nor will I necessarily guarantee everything going smoothly. So that's probably enough of my face and about me. I'm going to share some slides now, again, with the caveat of my technical skill notwithstanding. But we did test this. Pauline and I did test this. And hopefully I will put this on full screen and we will get going. So, someone shout if you can't see this, but Pauline's have got double thumbs up, so you know what she has no more thumbs to put up than that, so 100% on thumbage. Right. Firstly, when I was thinking about this, I thought about this from the point of view of marketing, and I'm again not an expert in marketing nor anything. I think it will turn out to be through this experience. But the reason I wanted to talk about using a tiny bit of marketing theory here is because this conversation often becomes about promotion and place in this. So we just put an advert out. Where do we need to put this advert? What does that advert need to say? And people will flock in, and sometimes that will be thing, but I think there is a bit more to it than that, and I'm pretty sure any professional marketers in the audience would probably say so too. So you've got a model here, one of the common marketing models, a product, price, promotion, and place. Now, this isn't quite right for a non-commercial situation. So I've kind of tried to interpret it for, if I can move slides, let's see if I can move slides. Yes, if it could be applied to Morris. So I talked about appeal, and firstly, so this is kind of like, rather than going top left, these models all go from 12 o'clock. So it talks about appeal first. So do we know what we're trying to sell and to whom and how that relates to what people want? So this is about how we're positioning ourselves. So is this about tradition? Is it about social? Is it about exercise? Is it about, get festival tickets if you join us? I mean, it's probably a little bit of several of these for each team, but there is something about where you want to lead that, and that might affect everything. There's something about barriers here, and I'll talk a bit more about barriers. Actually, I'm going to talk quite a bit about barriers here, but you're talking about often logistical and perception barriers for recruiting to Morris. So commitment, cost, social status. For some people, Morris dancing isn't something they show off. For some people, it really is. And certainly, I do. But and how does it compare with the things that you're competing with for those things? So, so actually, we know a lot of people, modern society, quite time poor. So actually, if you're going to make a weekly commitment, if you're going to start something that is quite a big commitment, how does that fit even into your short term? Not even necessarily thinking I'm going to be a member for years, but how does that fit into your your family commitments or your other social commitments or your work, and those will be things that people are thinking about and you might want to address. In terms of channels, this is more your typical thing that you might have turned up expecting to talk about. So how easy is it for people to find out about you, contact you, etc.? But this is really quite important. Actually, you're not going to have, this isn't a type of organization, unless there are unusual teams out there where you will get hundreds and hundreds of these inquiries. These are a few, and when you get one person coming through, you need to know how to, how does that get to you? How do you make it easy for that inquiry to get to you? How do you respond in a way? And how does that fit with their perception of what they're going to be? So if it's about friendly, then the tone of that response might well be the thing that is the reason they turn up at their first practice or not. And secondly, and there is something, how easy is it to find, contact you, join in, etc. And to continue coming. So how does it fit with other life? How welcoming is it, etc. This is quite a dense. The next slide is quite a dense one, and I won't read it all out. But I thought it might be useful. I think there is something about the stage the team is in, and that might shape how you want to do it. So there's a chance, if you're starting out as a team, that you want a very broad church. You want to get as many people as possible from wherever, or you feel like there is so much of an identity that it's really important that you fit that identity starts early. For instance, if you've got there's a couple of teams setting up at the moment with a real focus around inclusion, around gender identity and sexuality, and therefore it might be quite important that they get the membership really right. They really want to recruit people that really fit into the inclusive mold that so they can be that role model for everyone joining going forward. Equally, standards of dance or friendliness or gender, or as in a male-female gender split, might be really important. If you've got a strong membership, there's a chance to target recruitment. So for Five Rivers, and I'll talk a bit more Five Rivers at the moment, we've got really quite strong membership, but there is something about us wanting to keep a flow of younger end of us in. So we're topping up both in terms of kind of the future of the team, but also in terms of athleticism and tone that we want to set. But that doesn't mean we don't welcome everyone, quite frankly, that turns up at practice. And then there might be some teams that are struggling for members, and we know that those exist. We all know about those existing, and you might want to be targeting the instinct might be to target everyone, but my argument here would be if you're targeting everyone, you're unlikely to be successful. And there's something about where you do want to target. So a blanket approach, which isn't tailored to an audience, might not be approached. So anyway, that's your marketing bit. I'm going to move on when I can on the screen to talking about where people what the thought process might be. I'm not going to say I'm an expert in anything tonight, and I'm certainly not an expert in psychology, but there is something here about where your audiences are on these various barriers that people might be asking themselves. So there is something, and we've noticed it being out in the last 5 years, far more than 15 or 25 years ago, where people didn't know what Morris dancing is. What is this? Is it Scottish? Is it Irish? Whereas when I started dancing in my early 20s, people knew what Morris dancing was. It was Monty Python. It was a little bit of a figure of fun. So there is something about, do people even know it exists? But if people don't know it exists and don't know what it looks like, asking them to commit something to it. So there's some barriers there. There's something about whether it's desirable. Is it something I'd enjoy doing? Would I be welcome? Would I be good enough? Would I be fit enough? And there's where you might want to be looking at audiences where there's awareness already. So wider folk scene, friends, dancers. And then there's something for people that are existing Morris dancers or know they want to join already. There's some things about, can I physically do it? Would it logistically work for me? So how does it fit into my week, etc.? What level of commitment is required to make it happen? And my argument here would be the lower you are on this slide, the easier it is to recruit someone. But you've got fewer of those people around. So there is something about where you want to pitch yourself. There is, and there's something about diversity and inclusion here as well, whereas there are some people that there may be another set of barriers for people that aren't like what they perceive everybody that Morris dances are. So that might be about disability, it might be about sexuality or inclusion around that. It might be about race, and I think and ethnicity. It might be about all kinds of other things. It might be, but there are something about additional barriers around that, and I think probably that is worth a wider conversation beyond this call around inclusivity, and it's something I'm quite interested in. But I think I wanted to make sure I acknowledged it, because if we are wanting to be inclusive as a scene, as if we want to be inclusive as individual teams, then there is something about acknowledging those barriers and knowing they exist when we're trying to attract people. And we know that there are high proportions of society from different ethnic groups. There are high proportions with disabilities of various types, and therefore by not thinking about those barriers, you exclude a potential audience, and that includes around mental health. I'm not going to talk more about this now, but I'm interested in that, and they might have questions about that later. I'm now going to move on. You'll be glad to see it here to a case study. So a bit about Five Rivers, and again, this is intended not to be a model that will suit everybody, but something that might prompt ideas. And maybe if you get 2 or 3 nuggets from this, then the time will have been worth it. Hopefully, I will have felt the time is worth it anyway. So a few things about Five Rivers. First off, we value fun for ourselves, as well as others, as well as dancing well and as well as fun for others. In fact, it was so much so that when we set up, it was one of our explicit aims, and it's explicit in our constitution. We're based in Sheffield, which is a thriving folk scene. Over 20 Morris or associated performance traditional dance sides in Sheffield now, English traditions of dance sides. You could be in two Morris teams for pretty much any day of the week in Sheffield. Our glorious leader in the Fed, Pauline's even been dancing in Sheffield this weekend. It's part of a thriving thing. But that does mean there's lots of competition for members. There's loads of people that people want to. If you want to dance, there's loads of opportunity to do so. we actively want to be part of a city community and make an effort to show ourselves well. And when I say show ourselves well, we mean represent the Morris scene and the folk scene well in the wider city. So we explicitly want to be seen by the wider city, not hidden away doing our own thing. We look after each other, and we include our partners and families. So, you know, we are there to support each other. It is a big part of our scene. We've got specific, WhatsApp chats for people that are parents in the team. We're a predominantly male team. Well, we are a male team, and so we something about dadding is quite important to us there, and we make an outward effort, and we try to make an outward to be outward facing, talking to members of the public as well as other teams we're with. I'm moving on. So some stats about who we've recruited. So I did a bit of spreadsheet work because that is my temperament apart from anything else here. And I'm not going to go through each of these stats. I think the really pertinent one is half our members who've joined Five Rivers have not danced. Over half have not danced Cotswold before, although a number had danced another style of Morris or traditional dance. But I think the stark things about us are 33 of the 45 people that have joined the team over the last 16 years have come through existing friendships, either of us or of their partners or friends of friends, and often have seen us dance and know what they're getting into. There's several people who have been very strongly, and I'm quite proud of this fact, have been encouraged to join by their partners, having not been folky, and actually they've found this. But that is mainly where our recruits are come in from. People that we know and therefore have some things in common with us. They aren't random people responding to an advert. So only 3 of the 45 have come from web searches or online. A number of have seen us out and about and said, "Oh, I quite fancy doing that," and come that way. I think the other thing that I want to really emphasise for us is that over half again have joined between 25 and 35, which has been peers of most of the existing members of the team, and as many have been younger than that than had over. That has been is a key for a lot of people. A lot of society is a key. Having kids age, so it's been very important that we've been family friendly and partner friendly. But it has been we've recruited people broadly quite like us. So that's all I'll say about that for a second. If anybody's interested in that, I have more stats and beyond interest of nearly anybody else in the team. So why have people joined Five Rivers? Firstly, they've wanted a social scene, fun, supported bunch that they want to belong to. There's a sense of belonging here that I think people want in society, and you see a lot of writing about belonging at the moment in social sciences and public sector policy. People wanting to learn to dance, often from scratch, to want to dance with a good team, and we aim to be a good team and generally are perceived to be a fairly decent team in standard of dance. And that says existing dances, but it means existing dancers. So the standard is more important to people that are existing dancers. Regular exercise is often an added bonus rather than their primary motivation. But there are some people that are feeling a bit static in life. New dads, in particular, who've kind of felt, actually, I need to be up and moving. Although there is a counterweight of eating and drinking that sometimes goes with Morris, but at least it's physically active and about. And more surprisingly, Five Rivers have got the Forest Fed's very own James Maryclough does all our merch, and there have been a number of people that have wanted our hoodie, and that's been a key factor in wanting to join. So what have we done? Mainly we've made it a team that people like. We don't get too many bad words about us. We try to be polite. We try to be supportive. We try to be reliable. we try to be reliable for Morris organisers who are often those kind of super connectors that would recommend a team or not recommend a team, of which I know several faces on this call and involved in the three Morris organisations. We make ourselves visible. So we say yes whenever we can to things. We have weekly dance outs all summer. We are active on social media. We do an April Fool's thing most April Fool's days. We have merch comprising for some of us more than half of our wardrobes. The we make it obvious we welcome people. But that's about being friendly. We make an effort to include partners and kids when we organise events. They're partner and kid friendly. We encourage members to recruit. We make practice a fun experience. So when people try it, they come back, and that means welcoming when they come, not being overwhelmingly welcome, but we make jokes. It's not a serious experience of Five Rivers practice. We don't push for commitment. From the outset, we always said it was about fitting in with everyone's life, and we know that a Morris team won't be the first priority for nearly anyone, and actually it has to fit with work and life and partners and families, and we aim to get people dancing out within 6 months if they turn up regularly. So you don't have a long and generally if people first dance after the season, we try to get people up and dancing in kit and part of it, even if it's not full repertoire, and often isn't full repertoire. But a long protracted 2 years getting to dance out with a team, we find we think would put people off and isn't what we want to be. What has helped? We've done that already, haven't I? What has not helped? Well, I've talked about the number of Morris teams in Sheffield and regular clashes with other events, like the Playford in the Pub events and Euro dance in Sheffield. So people that dance it. Maybe we look a bit cliquey at times. All that matching merch maybe has disadvantages as well. Maybe it can appear a bit blokey at times, take the mickey out of each other quite a bit. We aren't actually very blokey, but I think we could appear it. We're not a mixed team. We're inclusive around about non-binary, but we're not a mixed team, and there are some people that would prefer to dance with a mixed team, increasingly large numbers, especially young people. We find we dance reasonably well, and people worry about commitment, fitness, overly serious, which they really shouldn't. Seeing the fitness of some of our members, apart from anything else, I will give names when it's not being recorded. We're saturated with very good musicians, so it's not a route in for being a musician. We don't welcome in people that are just wanting to play and then may get them to dance, because we have 12 plus very good musicians in the team already, and we all of us musicians like to play as well. And the drinking and pork pie culture, we think about this, and it's not who we are, but from the outside it might feel like it. And I think there is something about the inclusivity of that that is something to think about. And we do a lot. So there's a question about, actually, is it expensive to go away for several weekends over the summer? We don't have very high fees because there's lots of us, and we live in a cheap part of the country. But people might worry that it's expensive to join us. It isn't, and it's scalable. But we're talking about perceived barriers. It's as much about perception as it is about actual things. And I think this might be my last slide, Pauline, and be glad to know, because I've been wittering on, and Eddie will have far more interesting things to say than me, I'm sure. So there's a question, how does this work for Five Rivers? And as I've said, mainly the people that we've most successfully targeted are people who are in the wider folk scene, our wider social scenes, and Sheffield's a very friendly place with lots of interconnections between all kinds of people, or the wider dance scene. That has been right for Sheffield. It's been right for Five Rivers. That isn't necessarily mean. However, we regularly talk about wanting to attract the general public more, and in particular in terms of diversity and inclusivity. And this is something that we haven't cracked yet, and we want to crack. But in terms of success of recruiting, that's been where we've targeted, where we've explicitly trying, and where we've been most successful. So that completes a bit of my run through of I've lost my cursor now, of Five Rivers, and before that, a bit of thoughts about general recruitment and how that might fit in. Hopefully, it sparked a thought or two. I'm looking forward to the discussion a bit. So back to you in the studio, Pauline.
Thank you, John. Right, has anybody, John, can you check your chat and see if anybody's put any questions in the chat while you've been talking, although they may not have had time. And if there's nothing in there, could people raise a hand and ask a question, please?
There's nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. Okay. So anybody want to either ask a question or comment on anything that they found really interesting? Oh, Sarah.
Hello.
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 Hi. Yeah, Tom and I are in the position of being, well, we're in two teams, and one of them is doing so well that we are saturated with new members, even when we're not actually recruiting. And the other one, we are almost past the critical mass point where we can't even get 5 people. This is a rapper team, so we need 5. We can't even get 5 people to practice more than about once every 3 weeks. And we're finding it a real stumbling block how we get out of that rut, because if we try and find a new person, it is, well, I think the thing that really spoke to me is the no pressure to commit. It's really hard for a new person to come in and join who we don't already know, where there isn't a real focus on them to, well, we can practice again if you can come. Any thoughts from anybody how we get out of this rut?
Anyone want to reply to Sarah? It's a really hard question, but yeah. Anyone got any experience of recruiting to small rapper teams?
Phil from Mishmash is waving a physical
Phil,
hand.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Yeah, yes. Phil, go on. Let's hear.
Well, Mishmash at the current moment, this might help Sarah, I don't know. We have 6 dancers and 1 musician. Last summer we got 17 stands. We have a huge repertoire of 3 and 4 person dances. Mishmash started 18 years ago with 3 dancers and 2 musicians. In the past we've recruited, and I think we only once managed to get 12 dancers, maybe 13 at any one time. So we have a history of being a small side. I don't know if it worked for you. We don't seem to be able to recruit anyone very easily, possibly because we're so wrapped up in the small dances we don't think about it.
Yeah, I think our problem is because for rapper you have to have 5. If we have 5 people available on our practice night, we can't practice at all.
Yeah.
And we've got to the point where we can't practice at all, only very sporadically. And it's really, several people moved away during the pandemic, and we haven't had that. We missed those sort of 2 years of natural replacement. And now we're in a position where we can't say to someone, oh, we'll be in this place every single Thursday night, because half the time we haven't got enough to make up a set. And it's more, how do we manage to get a cohort of another 3 or 4 people minimum to come and all together? We have done the usual thing of trialing, having open days and learn to dance rapper type events.
Social media posts.
And social media, and none of it has really stuck.
Yeah, my apologies. I hadn't thought in terms of a rapper side. We tend to do Molly, Cotswold, and Border, and a bit of Northwest.
John, you're waiting for me to put a solution.
Well, what I was about to say was that in our early days, we did actually try some rapper, but there were only 3 of us who wanted to try it. We did have one person who was experienced at rapper, not a huge amount. And we ended up finding that with 3 people, the swords were too short. But there were a lot of withies outside. So we actually modified some of the rapper dances for 3 using withies so they would all reach. We dropped it because we decided it would take too much time to actually make it work. We wanted to do other stuff. But, it's bending with the flow, if you like. I can't help you. My suggestions have run out, I'm afraid.
So
Sarah, have you just a question then? When you run your open evenings or recruitment sessions, is that on your normal practice day and time, or have you tried to do them at weekends, maybe
We've done
the
both.
local council, something, get a promotion in a different way?
so uh, um so I've got a couple of thoughts, Sarah. Although they aren't, they aren't magic wand stuff here. Some of the things I've seen around, so both scenarios in Sheffield in terms of the oversubscription, which isn't the major problem here. But in case other people are in that position, I know there are teams around that have had wait lists or have been a bit more selective or around it. Although I'm quite determined Five Rivers will never be in a situation where we say no to someone that wants to join. On the shortage, what we've seen, Handsworth have done a really good job of reinventing themselves a little bit, and over the last few years, having been at a stage where the team was in real, I think, danger of not having enough people. I would be my interpretation from the outside, or not enough people to do very much anyway. And one of the things that was pretty successful for them was going to where they did open days, open kind of chance to try type things where they thought there were people at one of the universities, and they recruited university staff actually rather than undergrads. So it was about going to where there might be people of the right demographic rather than expecting them to find you. I think the other thing, I suppose, in terms of maybe something we do as a team is we practice on a Thursday night. On a Tuesday night, one of the officers puts up a poll saying who's around this week. So isn't specific to you, Sarah. It's not a suitable solution. But one of the things we get that really encourages attendance, personally, because it's, once you've committed a couple of days in advance, you don't get it's rainy, I can't be bothered going out that way. But it creates a norm of turning up to practice. That won't solve your problem with this team right now, but it might help other teams not get into it.
Doing that, and
Yeah.
it usually leads to practice being called off because only 2 or 3 people commit to it, and that's our problem. We need a bigger pool of people overall, but a single person joining, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on that person to then be the 5th person, which means we can practice every week, and I feel like that's almost putting people off at this point.
Shall we all ponder on that then, Sarah? We might come back to that because I think it's the similar problem for many teams. Shall we take the question from Russ next at Colchester?
Hi, yeah, thanks very much, Pauline, and thanks, John. That was a really interesting presentation. I was just interested, we've got a couple of members or former members of Colchester who also have been members of Five Rivers. I think that's because they went to university in Sheffield. So I was just, apologies if you've covered it in your presentation, but I just wondered if you, in trying to keep the youthful element of Five Rivers going, do you target Sheffield University, or do you actively try and recruit from there, or is it just word of mouth? Or
thanks for the question. Nice to put a face. I've heard your name mentioned in conversation, Russ.
Right.
In a good way, I hasten to add. We try to keep a relationship, especially with Sheffield University, who have a Cayley Society. So every year we go and do a spot at the Cayley Society. But we find undergrads have got so many going on in their life, unless they're already quite folky, then generally there's so many things to do, and there are university-based teams that and activities that are more folky, that we've generally not been a particularly rich vein of recruitment for us, unless people were folky and came to university here and wanted to find a Morris team, in which case we were eager to grab them. And thank you for your regular supply. We look forward to whoever you send us next. Yes, so that, I mean, that's the quick answer. I know other teams are more successful at recruiting from universities. While I'm talking, Pauline, I've got a question come through in the chat, asking why we started a new team if there's already so many in the city already, and is it specifically about the age range? So there were several of us who had danced Cotswold before and wanted an opportunity to dance Cotswold. There was an existing Cotswold team who we are very friendly with and have a lot of affection for in Sheffield City Morris, but those of us who had danced before wanted something different, and there were 4 reasons for that. One of which, only half jokingly, is green trousers. Secondly, we wanted to dance traditional repertoire, and most of Sheffield City's is made up tradition, which is their own tradition, but we wanted a chance to explore a traditional repertoire. Thirdly, Sheffield City play with a band, and we wanted to have more responsive musicians to the dancing, and we still have only 2 musicians playing at any one time maximum. And I think there was also some underlying element of wanting to own it ourselves, although all of us who danced before had been members of other teams with far more mixed age group, and now we're a mixed age group, and I'm one of the older ones. That's broadly why there wasn't what we wanted already in the team in the city, and we were quite jealous of what Pexton had, which was which was very in many ways quite similar to what we had, which wasn't available to us. So thanks for the question. That was from Tim Lloyd, and thank you, Tim, for the question.
Thank you. I think we'll take the next 2 people with their hands up, and then we'll move to the next speaker, Eddie Worrall, and then there'll be time for questions at the end, if that's okay. So can we have Chris Saremba, please?
Hi, so my comment was just for Sarah, about getting back to the recruitment if you have a rapper team and a Morris team. And in my experience, I've been on 2 separate occasions, like 2 separate teams. And then I've also been in a situation where we combined, because we also had the same issue. There weren't enough people to do longsword or rapper. So we combined the practices and the groups. And we had enough bodies. And what we would do is like, okay, we're going to do 1 rapper sword dance. We're going to do 1 longsword dance. And then the rest of the practice that evening would just be Morris. So that could be another solution if you have a dearth and a wealth of participants. That's it.
Yeah, I was trying to speak while I was muted. Thank you very much, Chris. I think Sarah put the thumbs up there. Yeah. And Tom, there you go. Thank you, Chris. Ian Young, Yateley.
Yes, hi there. A couple of things. First of all, as regards rapper, I missed the beginning of the question in the session, but we've recruited from within the side. At the instigation of our Squire Andy, who I see is in the meeting. Hello, Andy. And that's been that's been reasonably successful. Timing it, we have it within the normal Tuesday, although we have an extra meetings as well. So that's not been an issue as such. Obviously, here for general recruitment is what we're interested in. And I just wanted to ask a question about John's presentation. And I'm sorry if I missed this the first time. When you say the most successful group you recruited from was social folk and social scenes, perhaps you could just elaborate, and the chat will do, not rather than take up room now, as to what you meant by social scenes. Was it displays you were doing? Was it paid events or whatever? But I do agree that universities must be one of our target areas. We're a bit in the sticks here. We're near Reading, so then Kennett have obviously got their priority as Reading. And Guildford has its own, got Pilgrim. So we're difficult to sort of poach, really. But it has given me an idea that perhaps Farnborough, that's nearby, we could use that. So yes, thank you for that.
I'll very briefly Pauline, just on the social point, what we meant is friends and friends of friends by the social scene rather than anything formal for the team. So just what I meant from that is, nudging people to join the team that we knew in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So just for Ian's benefit, the team that Sarah was talking about, the rapper team, they only do rapper. So it's not that they're recruiting from a pool of people that do Morris and rapper. It's they only do rapper. So that's her problem. I think, did John, did you say like sometimes you need to go to other people? I just anecdotally, before I was in a member of Crook Morris, and they went to do work with the young farmers, and they managed to recruit a young farmer. So sometimes it is about going to other people who you may not even think might be interested, and you never know, you might pick up a new recruit.
Sheffield City's most successful recruitment of a different generation was when they were booked as an activity for someone's stag do, and they've now got 2 members that were on that stag do, and a whole new kind of generation have come in from the kind of the start of a couple of people from a new generation starting.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. Top tip. Right, I think Eddie, as we've reached 1:45, Eddie, are you ready? Are you ready, Eddie? So I think you need to unmute yourself. If you are,
I am, yes, and I'm
excellent.
unmuted as well. Yeah,
You're unmuted as well. Okay, Eddie. So this, I'd like to introduce you to Eddie Worrall, who's the musician for the Saddleworth Women's Morris and Clog, which is a new team. Anyway, he'll tell you all about that. So over to you, Eddie.
Okay, thanks, Pauline, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming along on this chat. I'm somewhat obviously following an enormously professional-looking presentation by John, so you'll have to bear with me. It's slightly more chat than the kind of hard facts and stats which John was quite rightly putting together on Five Rivers, who are a very good team. Saddleworth Women's Morris and Clog started in January. Its origin goes back to around about this time last year, and there's inevitably a backstory to this, and it's about a new side that started. So this is, I suppose, if you imagine Five Rivers in its first year, this is kind of where this team is now. So this is like a bit further back in the story. I recognise that's not terribly relatable to a side that's been going for decades, and many people on this chat will be in long-standing teams that have long-standing presence. But I think there's some elements of what's happened in how the teams come together and developed, which are common, I think, to any team. I've been a member of Saddleworth Morris Men for about 25 years as a dancer and musician. And I have danced Cotswold before that, so all told nearly 30 years, I guess, I've been involved in Morris. I've seen all the problems which have been talked about here, and I do understand what it's like to be in a long-standing team and just how difficult it can seem. Locally, Saddleworth, for those that don't know, it's a fairly small parish which is made up of lots of little villages and hamlets, if you like, on the edge of northeastern edge of Manchester, up in the Pennines. There's a population of about 25,000, something like that. So it's not a huge place, but it's quite strung out. It's not one town. It's a strung out place with even more micro kind of senses of identity within a village, even of a few thousand people, and a kind of like an overall kind of identity of being from Saddleworth. So that's kind of the background to the place. Saddleworth Morris Men themselves have been going 50 years this year, and that they face all the same problems about recruitment that are, has been talked about here. Long-standing teams, it gets harder and harder to see your way through. You do have a lot of things, I think, which come from the past. There's a certain way of thinking. There is always baggage which comes with how things were done in the past, and they can be things which help you or hinder you, and it can be difficult to see the difference between them sometimes. But it is a men's team, and always has been. Not unusual for when it started, perhaps back in the 70s, and there's not been a women's Morris team in Saddleworth. There has been, or was until just before COVID, a clog step team which started I think in about 1979, something like that. There was never terribly big, and latterly didn't do an awful lot. So although it was very much part of the local scene, it didn't have a lot of profile, perhaps, in that sense. And of course, it struggled with recruitment, the very thing we're talking about, and ultimately they folded. So that really was that, and then COVID hit the next year in 2020, and you know, whether any team was going to survive became, I think, an issue for all of us. What also happened, of course, with the Morris Ring is it changed its membership criteria. That there was that was in 2018, and one of the things that generated was in Saddleworth Morris a discussion about whether the team would want to stay all male or not, which it ultimately decided it did. But the Saddleworth Rush Cart was a focus of particular debate, because there already were thoughts that really it should be opened up to not just men's teams, which historically is what it had been. COVID kind of put that on the back burner, and those other things became more important. But ultimately, the decision was taken fairly unanimously, not exactly unanimously, but getting there, that it should do, and consequently it did. So there were women's teams coming to Rushcart. What that sparked a year ago is chatter on local Facebook community groups, and there's a whole swathe of different community groups for all these little villages in Saddleworth, which was coming from people who were not in the Morris scene, not folkies. They weren't anybody connected to anything that was going on, but they were saying, well, why don't we have a women's Morris team in Saddleworth? We could go to Rushcart, and it was kind of like a debate like that. What they didn't know is I was reading that. And also was Lucy Marston, who was one of the other founders of the team, who danced with Wakefield, now lives in Saddleworth, and is partner of Graham, who's in Saddleworth Morrisman. And we'd actually been talking about this very thing on and off, not really coming to any conclusion about how to go about doing it or where we'd find people from. So when this popped up on Facebook, we both jumped on it independently and said, yeah, great, we'll help you, which I think shocked the life out of whoever was putting it on there. But then very quickly we got hold of the people. We got us together, sat around my kitchen table over a brew, and actually it was like, well, yeah, we can do this. And actually what we need to do is need to advertise an open evening. Let's just actually test what really the appetite is, which we did in December last year. And we had about 30 people turn up, which was astonishing. So we did that, which then led to setting regular practices in January this year, and most of those 30 people turned up, which was, again, not what I expected, and pretty much they've stayed. So the issue then became, well, okay, we've got to get this team functioning. We have to think about a clear kind of program about what we're going to be doing in this year, what we're going to set targets for people to try and meet as a team. And obviously very quickly we had to teach 2 Northwest sets plus how to dance, because nobody had danced before. And the people that actually got involved in this is the really interesting thing. Virtually all of them had no background in Morris or folk, although within Saddleworth there was a lot of people who obviously were aware of Morris because there was a long-standing team in their community, and Rushcart's quite a big event locally at the end of summer, end of August. So people would come and watch it, for a weekend a year, and then not think about it for the rest of the year. But it was part of their consciousness, if you like. And they all fancied having a go because they'd seen men do it. Well, we want to have a go at it. And that was kind of where a lot of people were coming from. There were some people who were getting involved at that time who'd had some involvement in dance elsewhere with other teams, other types of Morris or sword, and also a few people who'd been part of the Clog and Garland side. So Step Clog immediately became part of the identity, and that kind of carried that on, which has been really quite interesting to try and mix the two things together. So, okay, that's the quick way to put it. So suddenly, you got a team, everybody's learning great, and you're going out dancing. 3 months later, brilliant. Sounds obvious it's going to happen. Well, it isn't. It really isn't. If it was that obvious, it would have happened 50 years ago. But it didn't. And I think what has changed is there was a change locally where there was an opportunity which came along which didn't before. That's clearly sparked people's interest. That was the lever which was deliberately used in how it is promoted. So it's thinking about what is there in people's minds locally about something that we can put across it. There was a hook basically from a story, and that became the story of how it started, at least. So that's something which I think does translate to other situations and other communities. There may be things happening, we're certainly not Sheffield, we don't have 20 sides on our doorstep, so we are much more remote out here, much more in the countryside, and although Manchester's on the doorstep, it's actually realistically too far to get to for a practice night. So we have a small community to recruit from. But I think you've got to think about what's going on locally. What can you do to reach people who don't think about Morris? Okay, so what's the hook locally for them that would want them to get involved? And I think it's interesting, take another Sheffield side, Harthill. You go back to the 70s, I think Jono's on the chat actually, who's a member of that. But they started to dance at some local, village festival or something, but a bunch of people had never done it before, and they were doing it for a laugh. And then suddenly that's the Morris team that's been around for decades, because people enjoyed it, and there's a wider scene, and you start to learn, you're part of a bigger movement. And I think people do respond to that. So you've got to think locally, what is there around us that we can latch onto? What can we hook onto to reach people we're not reaching? In terms of targeting, comms, if you like, as a broad topic, the one thing that I didn't do was say anything to the Morris community at all. There was no focus on them at all. It was purely local news. We were fortunate enough to get onto local community radio because they're always hungry for content anyway, and they do have a listening following local. It's hyper local. Local Facebook groups, which are community groups, and we just blitzed it so people got the message constantly in a concentrated time with a definite event that was the focus of that, which was an open evening about this. And this is something which was kind of trying to build some momentum and recognition about that. That's what worked. Certainly speaking to the people who did come along, it was that which actually made that happen. And people mostly came along individually. Some people came along with a mate, as in, well, I'll go if you go, kind of thing, which helps. But once you get them there, why did they come back in January? Having done this in December, why did they come back a month later? Well, I'm entirely sure I know the full reason for this, because it's going to be individual for everybody. But I think the thing which got them there, it's how you deal with it on the night. So recruitment isn't just about getting somebody to turn up in a practice hall. It's what you do with them when you get them there. And if you don't look after that, it's not the full job. You're not thinking clearly about what you're trying to do. Because recruitment doesn't mean, great, come in and we'll ignore you for the night, or you sit there until you know what you're doing, and we'll come back and we'll sort something out. It's about making them feel involved and having agency right from the start and keeping that going. And then part of that in January onwards was literally, and this applies to new people joining a team, not just a new team starting, but giving people clear targets and saying, we will be performing at this event and you will be ready, because we will make sure you are. We're not going to put you in a situation where you don't know what to do. You're going to be ready to perform, and we're going to be behind you. We're supporting you. We're not going to expose you to something you're not comfortable with, but you can do this. We know you can do this, and this is how we're going to go about it. And giving people a clear target dragged the whole team on. And literally, we've had 20 odd people learn how to rant, how to, do a star, how to, what cast out means, what up and down a set means from scratch. And running your practice evenings is a key part of recruitment. Is what you do with them when you've got hold of them, not just getting them there. And this has been a mass exercise in this. And then, of course, we had, starting in January, we had a very early on an invite to dance at the Home First Folk Festival, which is in mid-May, which is a reasonable amount of time. It's not, for pitching dancers, which, new beginners could learn in that space of time. gave them a target, which they're all scared stiff about, of course, because none of them had ever really done any kind of performance in public. But it's about giving them confidence. And I think the other thing about this was trying to think about building a team, which is a very transferable experience. It's not just Morris, it's a work team. It could be any kind of setting where people have to come together and work together with people they don't know in a way where they all agree on what they're trying to do and all work towards doing something they wouldn't have thought they could have done. And I think we've all got work experience of this sort of thing. We've all been through that experience probably in life in various ways. That's something which is really key to recruitment. Whether it's one person coming into that situation, you've got to tailor your experience to them, make them feel like they're part of a team. And this is a really, really key thing, because when you do that, you will retain people. And that, again, is one of the objectives of recruitment, is not just getting them there, it's making them feel happy when they are there and not letting them leave without good reason. Sometimes people will, but you want to give them every opportunity to stick with it, because that's what you want. You want people to do that. The other thing that happened, which was really interesting, is the age span. And it was literally people from the 20s to the 70s who responded to this. And we have now a group across that span. And what that does mean is that you're reaching all those points in your community that you're trying to recruit from. That's certainly helpful. And I think all those messages are going out at different levels now, which is really, really key. I think if you've got everybody in the same demographic or the same age group, that's really hard, because you're narrowing down the like recruiting like experience, which a lot of teams have. That's a difficult one to break out of, and I don't have an easy answer to that. Otherwise, I'd have just sent an email out and that would be the end of the Zoom meeting, because we would have been needing to sit here. But I think the more you do think about diversity of background, which is something that John picked up on, and that could be just age even as much as anything, the more you are reaching other parts of the community you're trying to recruit from. So I think that's something that's been quite key as well. It's fair to say that with a new side, you don't have any particular limits as to quite what the side's going to do. And I think more importantly, you're not limiting yourself to think what we might end up doing. And I've been quite deliberate not to tell any of them that they can't do something. It's all about what you can do and what you can achieve. And actually, we can go and do this. And yes, we might not have a massive repertoire at the moment, but we have enough. And we've had nearly 20 gigs this year of varying kinds, from pub nights to dancing on processing down Deansgate for Manchester Day. We've just this afternoon been performing at a rehearsal for a professional play, which is just a slightly bizarre thing, but it's come our way, and we're on stage teaching actors how to dance our dance, which they only learnt back in January. I didn't tell them they couldn't do this, and you're not ready yet. And I think this is a key message again about recruitment, is don't limit people and don't limit what they can envisage that they can achieve. Help them get there, and there may be things which they can't do, but make that a positive experience, as in these are things which you can do, but these are the steps to get you there. And again, it's about just making sure people integrate in a way. I don't know, for an existing team, if you've got somebody who's been dancing 40 years and knows it backwards and has forgotten more than they ever knew, that's one thing, and that's really difficult to integrate somebody who's been doing it for 2 weeks. But that person who's been doing it 40 years was that person in the past, and you've got to recognise that. And I think that's something that teams have to be honest about, as in making sure that it doesn't matter how long you've been there, be that person, in your approach that's just walked through the door, and see it from their point of view. And that in itself can galvanise how a team thinks about recruitment. That's about being open and welcoming. And I think the one thing that, even for a new side, that I've been very strict about is recruitment doesn't stop. So yes, we might have got a bunch of people, and yes, it might have been really hard to manage a team of complete newbies and get them up dancing and get a kit sorted out, which caused huge debate. And we're already on to phase 2 of the kit debate now, which is something I'll talk about as well in a minute. But you've got to accept that you never stop. And I think the moment a side says, actually, I think we've got enough people in the minute, we don't need to recruit, that's when you start failing. And that's where you end up. Suddenly, you haven't got a team anymore, because you will have people going out the other end. You have to accept as much as they're coming in, they will leave constantly. And certainly as time goes on for teams and they reach a mature kind of level, it's constantly going to happen. So all these lessons that you put effort into recruitment, and you do, all these kind of projects and do all of this, you get up the next day and you do it all again, and you keep doing it, and you never stop. And you have to change the entire mindset of what the side's doing to think this actually is what the side is doing. It's not, yes, it's performing, yes, it's got commitments and it wants to put on a good show, and it wants to display certain traditions or whatever it might be. But at the core of its operation, it has to be the issue of recruitment, and what is it that's stopping us. And you have to be brutal about it and constantly demand, of yourselves that we do these things. We are open. We do reach out to the non-Morris community. You do look at what you're doing with people when you get them there. You do think about how they're going to stay and why. What is it that makes people stay in a side? And this is a constant thing that has to be a thread all the way through everything that you do. The local dance outs you do, how you put your comms out locally in your community, how you run events which are aimed at trying to get people involved. These are all things that have to be a constant thing. And as much as we recruited all those people back in January, we ran a recruitment exercise again straight after Rushcart, which is the big shop window for us, as well as Morris locally. And sure enough, you recruit another 3 or 4 people, and this is something we'll do again in the new year, and we'll do it again several times next year. And yes, you might get 1 or 2 people or nobody, but you're getting it out there, and you're getting the message out there that you are looking for people to get involved, and obviously give them a reason why. On the kit thing, I think we've all probably been through kit debates in our teams over the years, and being Northwest, in terms of tradition, kit is kind of quite a central part of the image. It's meant to be a kind of a showy kind of kit, at least traditionally. So what your kit looks like, and that's not easy when it's an established side, but what your kit looks like will attract or repel potential members. Yeah, it's part of how you put yourself across. John mentioned green trousers with dear old Sheffield City Morris men. I'd never wear them. I can't imagine myself wearing green trousers in public ever, but it suits them, that's fine. But you've got to understand that really will put people off. So if you're going to do something like that, have a good reason for it, but recognize it may not be a plus point when you're trying to recruit. That said, people can be very strange with kit. I spent 25 years wandering around with fresh flowers in my hat most of the summer, and that doesn't put people off joining. So who knows? But I think in terms of, to try and put some sort of wrap up on this, I think you've got to think about your local community. So what is around you that you can realistically recruit from in terms of population? Okay. The one plus side about this side starting in Saddleworth is because it was a women's side, it wasn't recruiting from the same pool of people that the men's side's recruiting from. So there was no kind of fighting for resources going on between 2 sides in one place, which was a massive plus, being able to get something going. If it had been a mixed side, it would have been much harder, I think. There's also, of course, the recruitment trend nationally, which you've seen from the Morris census, which is that of people joining Morris sides, roughly 2/3 are women and 1/3 are men. So it's leaning into a demographic trend anyway in Morris as it happens, which has made it easier. Because I think that's the result that the census shows, that it is easier to recruit women than men for whatever reason. Bearing in mind, this is a lot of mixed sides saying it's not just men's and women's sides on their own trying to recruit into a single gender side. So think about your community, think about the hook or hooks even that would get you into the press, which put a positive, and it has to be positive, story out there that would reach people who aren't on your radar, people you don't know, people who don't know you or who's in the side, who would be interested in what it is you're trying to hook onto, whether it's a local festival or event or something. or start one, start a dance out on New Year's Day or something and make a splash and make that your thing. That's what Monk Seaton Morris have done up in Monk Seaton in Newcastle. They started dancing out on New Year's Day, and that's a huge thing now, all these years later, and that's where they recruit from, because they started it and just publicised it. And now all the pubs are full on New Year's Day in Monk Seaton, despite everybody being out the night before as well. So think about something that's a hook and use it, and be ruthless about using it. If you are in an area where you are, you've got a lot of sides around you, you're going to have to be mindful of that. And I think you have to not get into turf wars. I think that helps nobody. And that makes it much more difficult. And then Sheffield must be an incredibly hard place to start a side when you've got 20 other sides to worry about, and because you're going to have to deal with them just side to side. So that puts an extra spin on it. But in terms of the strategy for communications, think about where your demographic is that's going to look at that stuff. It's certainly true that with social media, some of them are aimed at different demographics. So where you're trying to hit, and make sure you're matching that, which, Brian Kelly has put lots of good stuff about that on that. And I certainly advise you having a read of that. And just don't stop. Just don't stop. Don't give up. As soon as you give up, then that's where it all goes wrong.
Yeah, wise words, Eddie. So thank you, Eddie. Can I have your questions for Eddie, please? Either in the chat to Eddie. Has anyone put anything in the chat to you, Eddie?
Nothing in my chat, no.
Oh, okay. So Ashley, go ahead.
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ashley.
Yeah, that's all right. I've got a really crappy headset on and no video, but I'm not good to look at anyway, so don't worry about that. Yeah, I mean, I'm another Sheffielder, as you can tell from the accent, and I'm in two sword teams. I'm in Grenoside and Handsworth, and I never intended to join Handsworth, but I joined when they were at their really low ebb of not having many members. And I think one of the problems that we've, with both teams being traditional sides, is trying to convince some of the older members that things need to move on. And I think it's been a struggle for both teams to say, we need to move to different areas. We need to have women in the team and stuff like that. And it's been a struggle to kind of move on that. And that's been one problem. But I think the other problem, which I do see an element of being in both teams, that there's very little kind of crossover between different teams, sort of helping each other out. And I think a place like Sheffield, I think we're missing a trick to a degree, where we have got lots of teams that we could actually help each other out and help each other with the recruiting, because Handsworth aren't doing too badly at the minute for members, but I do know that because of some of the people that they've taken on, who, some people, when you do get people from universities and from foreign countries and stuff like that, they go away at Christmas, and so you've suddenly lost several members of your team, and Handsworth so I think they've got enough for Boxing Day, but you find problems with that, with where you're recruiting from, which is why I try and not that successfully, but I try and get involved in other more general things that are less sort of folk oriented, to try and get more ordinary people in. And I've had some degree of success with that, but we're still struggling. And I think one point that I think it was Sarah made, that when you need to reach that critical mass, and sometimes it's very difficult to get to that point. So you may get one new recruit, but if you're having difficulty, getting a practice together, then that one new recruit might think, well, sod this, I'm off. And it's very difficult to get to that critical point, which is why I think it would be helpful when you have got a lot of teams in one place to sort of help each other out.
John, do you want to answer that as Sheffield having lots of teams? I mean, I know from my personal experience, if somebody comes to my team but they can't come to my team for some reason, I will definitely point them to a team that's local to them or that they could join or that they might be interested in. I'm sure that a lot of teams do that. Anyway, hand on to John.
Nice to hear from you, Ashley. I was going to say see you. I mean, I think it's interesting hearing different perspectives on the Sheffield team. I don't want to make this too much of a Sheffield thing. My experience is Sheffield teams were really, really helpful when Five Rivers set up, and we continue to try to do that for other teams. I think, and I think I've loved seeing how Handsworth in particular have been thriving. And I know there's a couple of younger members coming into Brenner side at the moment, and I think Handsworth have done an amazing job, and you can see from the dancing, if anyone's seen Handsworth over the last year or two, it's just, and sometimes all it takes is one or two people, and you just have suddenly there's a peer group for another generation that goes on. But as Ashley says, sometimes that means the team has to change. So sometimes for the Monks Eaton example that Eddie in his far more concise and better chat through talked about, at some point those traditions you need to work out whether they still work for you, and sometimes they won't work for a team as they refresh themselves, and sometimes they will be the thing that is pivotal to it, like the rush bearing etc. is for Saddleworth. Other than that, there's lots of interesting and good points Ashley's made, but possibly one for he and I to chat in the pub about sometime.
Yeah, good point. Sorry, Ashley, I had to mute you because your microphone was doing something weird. So apologies for that. Emma from Treacle.
Hiya. Just to pick up something that Eddie said about culture, I just think it's really interesting. Like, I think especially for a side that's been there for a long time, we get into habits of kind of like, we know what's expected at a practice, we know what's expected at a dance out. We had a couple who joined us for a little while, they've actually stopped, but no Morris background, no folk background, and just, to realise we have a culture. Like, I had a friend who kind of came along to one of our cultures, she was studying anthropomorphology, whatever that is. But like, just to observe a group and to realise, like, we do have ways of doing things. And if we've got someone who's new to that, it is really important to welcome them in and explain that culture and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. Otherwise, they've made this massive step to come to something, you've got to break it down for them and make it acceptable. The other thing I'm kind of interested in, no one's mentioned kids. My husband and I both dance, our parents danced. Our kids have just started dancing. So, I mean, John, you said that you're family orientated. Like, how are we thinking about allowing kids into our side? We've been very grateful that, I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old who've been allowed to join our side. Obviously, that changes the dynamic for the team a lot, and not every adult wants to dance with kids. But equally, generational is a big reason why a lot of us are into folk.
To pick up on the first point, perhaps the second point as well. Actually, I mean, we have had a discussion already, and the age profile that we are in Saddleworth Women's Morris and Clog, there are a number of people there with young families, probably a lower age than the ones you mentioned. But it's smart to debate about having a children's team, whatever. And I think at the moment, that's probably just too much of a task to take on because we've got so much that's trying to get sorted out. But I think that's right. I think that's got to be part of it somewhere along the line, because that is a way of getting succession, really. I think that's a great way for the sites to do that if you can manage it. But I think on the first point, I think culture and being honest about that. If you're having those tough conversations as a side, you're already on the way to recruiting people, because that's what you're going to have to do first. If you don't fix that, all that effort potentially is going to get lost in the weeds of people not being interested, and not engaging with it in your own side, and that really can be tough. But I think it's necessary.
Okay. Oh yeah, sorry.
On the kids' point,
Yeah.
if I may, I think I was mulling it actually. I was thinking, damn, I missed that point. So you picked that up. You picked that up. We have had lots of debate about this, and we've got our first kind of second generation member of the team recently joined. I mean, they are taller than me and 15. That's a certain thing that isn't a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old who's looking cute in kit. But and we have there's a perennial feeling about how you balance what the team is with wanting to include. I mean, and I think that's the thing. I mean, in Sheffield, we're lucky that there's such a weight of scene that there is young person's provision, and we've set up a kids longsword team for our kids because they did longsword at workshop and wanted to do it. But I know other teams actually really value, and it becomes really important to have some time away from the family on a weekly basis, even though events are more family friendly. And actually that is about including young adults in a different way too. And if I'm honest, as there are people that struggle to have kids or don't want to be around kids for other reasons, and there is that element as well that needs thinking about. Where we've settled on is 12 years old, and you have to have an adult willing to take parental responsibility for you present. And there's a load of policy documents, but there's something about those routes, and maybe there's a wider conversation for another time about kid and child provision, and how you set that up separate from recruitment into main teams, which I'm happy to have a chat about, doing the Sidmouth kids stuff and being around a lot of kids, Morris and dance stuff.
Yeah, because that's an alternative, and Jack Worth has talked about that from the Morris census results. Is said that is another option, is to set up a children's team, set up a separate children's team, and that would still be a massive legacy that you've left to the Morris world, even if they don't want to be part of your own Morris team. So that's another thought. Right, can I go to Tim Peters, who's got his hand up?
I lost the question slightly there, Tim. Your mic's really low. I missed the middle bit of the question. Yeah. It was basically a retread in a way. It was partly because the kind of local, a lot of it was local Facebook groups, which have quite high numbers, if you like, locally. As I say, that Saddleworth's about 25,000 people. And I think I was basically spamming about 10 different groups across the area, the combined membership of which is something like 40,000. So clearly people were seeing the message more than once by all these groups. So that was getting on that, and I was getting it in the paper, in the kind of like the month leading up to Rushcar, and it was just pushing the same buttons that we pushed before in terms of hyper local press and social media, which is non-Morris focused, deliberately non-Morris or folky focused at all, and that's what generated the response, and that was on the basis as in, we're going to be at Rushcar for the first time as a new team, so come and watch us, and by the way, we're running an open evening a few days later, so come down if you enjoyed it, come down, have a chat, have a cup of tea and a slice of cake or whatever, and you could be doing this next year. You could be in Rushcar next year, because we weren't last year. You could be next year, and that basically was the hook. And again, it was just a development really of the same thinking as to what's going to get somebody's attention, and if somebody's curious about that or is halfway tempted, what's going to push them through the door. And it did. So
Thank you. Good question. Oh, John, do you want to come in on that?
Just very briefly, we one of our members is a comms professional, so we've done a fair amount of we've been on Radio Sheffield, we've been on Look North, we've regularly had press in the Sheffield papers, and no recruitment has ever come about off that for us. I mean, maybe it's not hyper local enough, and it's good for a reason, and we like to give profile to Morris Dancing, and we like to give profile. But so there are some. I think it's very much tailoring it to where you are, and it's obviously worked for Eddie for Saddleworth Women's, but I wouldn't see. Our experience has been that press isn't and hasn't been the be all and end all of it, or actually hasn't been effective at all for us.
And I'll just come back on that. I've had Laura is on the chat from Saddleworth Women's, Morris, and she's come back saying the people came back for the cake. So there you go. It can be as simple as that.
Thanks, Eddie. Right, I've got just a few minutes left, so I've got Sarah and then Robert. Sarah.
Actually, it's Tom.
Oh, Tom, sorry. It's the name on screen was Sarah. Hello, Tom. Yes, Tom, off you go.
Yeah, so going on talking about the whole thing, one of the things that we found is even it's a double-edged sword when you say about people joining you who are also in other teams. As we're finding out, when you're down to your bare minimum numbers, and the majority of your dancers, almost half of your team, is coming from another team, then you are subject to that other team. So if that other team is dancing out, you're not going to be able to dance out, even if you've been booked to the same event, and you've got a little bit of a who's going to give way, how are we going to manage this kind of scenario. I don't know if anyone else has come across that at all, but again, I think it all boils down to you get into this kind of little bit of a rut where you need to be seen to be recruiting, and if you don't have the number, and it's getting the numbers to get yourself to practice, to get yourself good enough to dance out, to be seen, to recruit other people.
Maybe you could just run workshops. Then you don't need that number of people. You can use them. But yeah, you're right, Tom. Does anybody, John or Eddie, want to pick up on that?
Just one thing. I think you've kind of said what I think I was going to say here, which is that positive messages are really important, because nobody wants to jump onto a sinking ship. And if that's the image or the profile you're putting out there, as in join us because we're about to fold, and that works recently for you, Toxeter, but that was also in the context of becoming mixed, which actually was really what recruited for them, I think, and the fact they were getting press, quite a lot of press. But I think you've got to tell a positive story, because that's what people want. People want to be part of something that's positive and it's going to add something to their life, and they're going to enjoy it, and it's going to be fun. If it's like, come and commit to doing this for, X amount of time this next year. Otherwise, we've all got nothing else to do because we're going to have to fold. Nobody's going to respond to that message. So messaging is really key about how you do it.
Yeah, good point, Eddie. Thank you. So I'll take Robert, and then we've had a message in the chat that John's going to address. Oh, and Ashley, quickly. Yeah. Okay, Robert, off you go.
Hi there, Robert Chisman, Carnbray Morris and Trig Morris. This year, during the summer for both teams, I've been out, and whoever's been giving out the leaflets or whatever is saying, oh, you're interested in joining. Oh, yes. So I've gone over, took their email address. We decided with both teams to have our first practice of the season as an open evening. I emailed these people 2 weeks beforehand and a few days beforehand, and in both cases we had nothing. I had 4 people that should have turned up at Carnbray, 9 people we had interest in turning up at Trig, and absolutely nothing. Anybody any ideas how once we've got an email address, it's actually to encourage them to actually turn up? It was quite a disappointment in the end. I thought I was doing quite well until that happened. Also, going back, funny enough, to what the other gentleman was saying a little earlier, what Tom was saying, I joined Carnbray just the last 2 years, after being with Trig for many years, the idea being that I wanted to try a few more different dances. And we have been to 2 events where both teams are tied up together. And it's been quite funny watching me try to change board tricks in the middle between dances. That was quite funny. So that can be done. Fortunately, our kits are very similar, but that wouldn't happen if you were in 2 different teams with totally different kits. I can see that being a problem for somebody. That's just an aside. But if anybody's got any ideas as how to, once I've got people's addresses, I've got people's emails, but it was somehow or another, I'm missing a trick from getting them from an email to actually get them to an open evening or a practice. Anybody any ideas, please?
Did you ask them why they didn't?
No, I haven't actually. You know, that might be an idea. I've still got their addresses.
I would ask them,
Yeah,
and then maybe
yeah.
you get some feedback.
Yeah,
It's probably a
that's a good
variety
idea.
of reasons, but yeah, maybe they would tell you.
Yeah. Well, I've had 2 responses. One couldn't make a Thursday.
Mm.
Oh, I think both of them couldn't make a Thursday. So I redirected one of them anyway to Tara Drether on a Wednesday. Whether they've joined or not, I don't know. I've not heard anything. So I have been active on that response, but I might just say, well, you know, I mean, I did send a follow-up email. Sorry, we missed you. We're still open to people. That's still done nothing. So yeah, might be an idea to try and get some feedback. Thanks,
But
Paul.
I think it's still a really good idea to actually collect their email addresses, because you at least got a better chance if you can.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should carry on.
Yeah,
I'm just
carry
trying to
on.
think of some extra ideas to bridge that gap between from getting them on an email address, sending them emails, and actually getting the darn people to. The only other thing I can think of is go around to the houses, pick them up, and take them there. But that is
Offer them a lift.
slightly logistical in
Oh,
Cornwall.
yeah.
It's
Well,
so spread out.
actually, that could be a thing for some people. Who it came up in I think the previous year's recruitment talk, is that some people don't have transport. You know, so actually, you know, if you can if someone can offer a lift, then and yeah, that's not a bad idea, is it? And they might actually just jump in the car and go.
Yeah, I think that might be a good one. Thanks,
Let's
Pauline.
try. All right. I know we've run out of time, so I understand if people need to go, but there are still a few people asking questions, so I'm happy to stay if others do. But if people need to go, then do go. Right, Ashley.
Yeah, basically, I want to say that I've had exactly the same experience with collecting people's emails, and you send enthusiastic emails out to them saying, "Oh, we've got a practice, or we've got an open day, or whatever," and you get nothing back. So, you know, I think it's a good idea to maybe email and say, you know, why. How exactly you word that, I don't know, but I'll work on that. But yeah, I have had that same experience, and it kind of underlines that there's plenty that you can do once you get somebody through the door, but getting somebody through the bloody door is really difficult. And the other thing that I was going to say is that I agree with Tom that when you've got people who are in multiple teams, it can be a problem. So, you know, I can only get to every other Handsworth practice at best, because on Wednesdays I've got a Granaside practice. We have them every other Wednesday and every other Thursday, which is good, because people who can't make Thursdays but can make Wednesdays, they can get to a practice. But it is a problem when you've got people who are in different teams, because you can't commit. So the more that we can get from different areas, the better. And if there is anybody who can, you know, who has a spare evening and can get to another team in the area, you know, that's another way to possibly at least help out with practices, even if you can't always make dance outs. Because in some ways I would rather people be able to make a practice to make the numbers up, so that we can, you know, actually keep practicing, even if they can't make many dance outs. So there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember what it is, so I'll not take any more time up.
Ashley. I'd forgotten there was a question in the chat that I'd asked John to reply to. Can we take that next? I did promise.
Yep, go for it.
Thanks.
So there's quite an important question around from someone living in an area which is predominantly Muslim and trying to recruit posing problems, and specifically asking us as a team in an urban area, although actually Saddleworth is by no means monocultural, if we're aware of diversity and if we have any dancers of colour. I'll be brief on my answer on this, but we think about this a lot. We have got non-British dancers, but generally they're Northern European dancers rather than people from wider world communities. And it's something we've tried various things on, and it hasn't been, but probably there are more things to try. The next thing on my list to try, however, which is what I wanted to share, is I've started making contact lists of teams doing other dances from other national traditions around the world, and trying to make a connection with other teams. So even if it's not a direct recruitment, because of those different levels of barriers for people, actually, if we can spend some time with a Bhangra group or for instance, and there are a couple in Sheffield, then and if we perform together, at least are taking to different audiences, increasing visibility. But I think actually it takes it. You'll get some individuals that are willing to start, embrace jumping well outside their comfort zone. But it takes, we are such a white scene, the wider folk scene and as a Morris scene, that I think there are intermediate steps before big recruitment pushes that are going to be necessary before that starts making. But it's something I've been thinking about, and if the person that messaged through to Pauline wants to chat about that, I'm really interested in it, or for that matter, if anybody else wants to chat.
Yeah, very good point, John. Very good point. And if they're dancers already, even though they're doing a different style of dance, then they're probably going to be quite interested in doing Morris dance, because it's another form of dance, isn't it?
Possibly, but I mean, this is about recruitment. This is about connections and being visible, and going and dancing in places that we make an effort to go and dance in places where it's not just the local community down a pub, because not everyone drinks for a start.
Not everyone wants to go to the pub. No, that's right. Okay, question from Ian Young, Yateley.
Yeah, thanks. Quite a lot of good stuff come out of this as far as I'm concerned. I think Robert Chisman was it, and Ashley, very fundamental. Once we in Yateley have cards, get email addresses, telephone numbers, etc., and that's a crucial moment, isn't it? It's an absolute crucial moment. And I think at this point you got to find the hard salesman in your side. I don't like the term, and I don't like the methods that are sometimes used. However, you've got to grab them, you've got to hold them, and someone said drag them along to practice. It's almost like that, but you have really, there's an opportunity. They've given you some details. They didn't have to give you the details, and I think there's a bit of leeway there to bring in the right sort of pressure, encouragement, discovery, and all the rest of it. And some people in the side, there's always going to be some people better than that at others. Coaching, for example. And I think it does need a conversation. And if they don't turn up, that conversation needs to take place as well. We need to learn why, someone else already mentioned it. Why did you not turn up? We're really interested to know, because this is valuable to us, and you're valuable to us, and we'd like to improve what we do. But let's not shirk from that. Risk stirring up a bit in order to get some feedback.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. Phil, and then I want to bring in Michael Stimpson after that, if possible. So Phil first.
Yeah, it's more of a comment. We did try the feedback route. We had a couple of dancers look quite promising, and they stopped coming. So we did ask, why have you stopped coming? And the answer was, it's harder work than we thought it was going to be, which was sad, really, all round. But if you're trying to do some decent dancing, that's what it's got to be. And on a slight change of note, which isn't recruitment, I think there was a comment about feeding off other tarts with other sides and trying to get stands out with that, I accidentally fell into organising stands for 2 different sides, which actually turned out to be a bit of a bonus in one way, because I know when each one's going to start dance out, and so does everybody else. So there's an interesting one there. If anyone wants to organise stands for 2 of their sides, it can be helpful. Bloody hard work though.
Thank you, Phil. Right, can I, Michael Stimpson's got a good point. Can I, do you want to speak to it?
Can you hear me?
Oh, not very well, actually.
How's that?
No, a bit loud. Can
I was just saying that last year I raised the idea of the Duke of Edinburgh scheme.
I don't know if people can hear, but Michael Stimpson last year, he's from Phoenix, Morris, and they contact local schools and offer to give them, I don't know what they call it. Is it badges for Duke of Edinburgh? So they're getting young people involved. It's a really good way of getting young people involved, and they have had some recruits through doing that. So it's definitely worth a thought. What age range are they, Michael?
Well, they start off at 16, but the 7 that we recruited are now in their early 20s.
Okay, so from 16 onwards, yeah. Okay, brilliant. So that's a top tip from Phoenix there. Right. I don't think I've got any more questions coming up, and I've we've overrun by a quarter of an hour, so I'm terribly sorry. It just remains me to say thank you a massive amount to John Brenner, to Eddie Worrall, and for everybody for asking a question. You can unmute yourself if you like and applaud.
Thank you.
Right, well, thank you very much. And I know John's going to send me his slides. I might be cheeky and ask Eddie if he could do some kind of notes from what he said, or a little summary, short
I'll have to watch you back and see what I said.
Yeah. Well, just a short summary. It doesn't have to be
That's my notes.
that long. That's your notes. Excellent. That will do. Right. Yeah, and then we can send it out to everybody, and we'll make the video recording available when we have it too. So thank you very much for coming. And I hope that everybody has got at least one tip, because you only need one really good tip from one of these sessions to make it worthwhile and help with your recruitment. So